All right, everybody. I'm going ahead and starting. So this is our last of this particular format of this class, um, and for now, I'm pretty seriously planning on moving over to Uvu, which is um, the a similar thing to Skype, but it allows for you to have recordings pretty easily and to put them up to YouTube pretty easily. So I think that's just an easier way, an easier format for working into the future. Um, and I will probably be doing the meetings through Constant Contact. So if you're not on my Constant Contact list, you should definitely sign up for that, and that is on my site, jasonaugustusnewcomb.com. If there's like a mailing list option on there, and if you're not on there, you should sign up for it, because that's probably the way that I'm going to arrange them into the future. I will send to this list that has received this thing as well, at least initially, but that's going to be the way that it happens most easily. So let's talk about the path of Beth, which I think we didn't really define last time, but it actually means a house. So it's as the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet and of the general our cultural alphabet, the B sound, is that which kind of encloses and contains the universe, and so that sound actually moves from Kether into Bina, which is that enclosure and container. So it's quite a one-for-one kind of an energetic description, which is fairly rare in Kabbalistic things, because quite a lot of it's a little bit convoluted. But this is fairly much the one of the most direct moments here. Hold on a second. Someone just sent me something over on the side here. I'm just going to read it. Okay, not a problem. So let's talk about the path of Beth, people's experiences with it. Some of you had already experienced it a bit before, so we can lay low. You know what I'm realizing, though, as we're talking about this, I really need to have one more class in this series, because we're going to be discussing Aleph, but we're not going to be having had experienced it. So it's a funny thing that I just realized. Only within the structure of the class, I go, oh, wait a minute, we aren't going to actually be discussing people's experiences with Aleph. So we will have one more class. I think next week I'm working, so it would have to be in 2 weeks. But we're going to continue forward having classes. The first New Hermetics class will probably be on. It'll probably be one that covers a few different pieces of material, from just the altered state to initiation, and perhaps creating the inner temple, as those are some of the most basic fundamental parts of it. And then the next one after that would probably be about goals. So basically, go ahead and tell me your experiences of Beth. Or Bet. Ooh, Robin is very enthusiastically saying Beth was phenomenal. Okay, in what way? Robin says, in every way. It seemed that so very many aspects actually came together. Terrific. Yeah, it's interesting, because these last few paths really are about sort of the experience of, oneness with the deity, and so they're rather difficult to anticipate how our reactions are going to be with them, because it's sort of like, you're just sort of letting yourself be open to the experience. Kevin says it felt like a culmination of all the paths. Yeah. Yeah, and in a lot of ways, it is, because this next path that we're going to get to is almost, it's beyond activity. So it's not really, it's almost a precursor to the paths in some way. Robin says, have been working with perceived blockage for a while now, and almost felt as if the blockage had finally released, or was continuing to release. Well, good. Blockage in what sense? Just in life in general, or in opening to inner experiences? Spiritually, okay. Robin says spiritually. Well, that's terrific. I'm glad to hear it. Robin wanted to thank Juan and everyone for helping in the process. Yeah, it's been a fun process working with you guys in this tree of life. We've now basically traveled the whole tree of life at this point. Which reminds me, I wanted to get a couple of things. I'll be right back. Looks like that door was making funny faces while I was gone. Juan says that it's been an insightful and thought-provoking journey. Thank you all for the company along the way. Brendine says that she's done it a number of times and recalls the feeling of union a few times with it. A oneness, no division. That's the agenda with that particular path, and all three of these last paths. So, Robin says, I've been practicing solo for so long and felt had hit a block that could not be worked through, so I'm sure the process with all of you has helped to clear that block, or help me work towards getting it cleared. Again, so many thanks to all. Well, like I said, we are going to have one more class, so I don't want everyone to say their goodbyes today. So, here we have the Tree of Life, and at this point, we have worked through every single one of these paths, with the exception of this one. So, this particular path has the unique privilege of being the only path that begins by going through all 9, or I guess 8, because you started in Malkuth, of the intervening paths between. So basically, the setup is a very long process to even get into this one, and so that's going to help you to an extent to kind of open up to that oneness state. Just simply because you're going to be slowly but surely moving through all these different states of consciousness, and all the different work that you've done is going to be getting moved around in you. Juan says, this isn't a goodbye, just ensuring that that we're aware of how grateful we are to me as well as each other. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to hear it. So, people's experiences. Oh, hold on a second. Kevin, do you mind if I share that? You sent that private to me, so I don't want to share it with others if you're not wanting it to be shared. Okay. Yeah, you've got a little setting on there, and if you look at, you've got it set to private right now, so it's only, your messages are only going to me. But so anyway, Kevin says that um, he felt himself on the path and seemed to have a revelation of the futility of his own wisdom. The understanding of this was overwhelming. It felt like a culmination of all the process in arriving there, which is a really wonderful thing to come to a realization of. I mean, it's tough. You know, every day, everybody has to kind of maintain an awareness of the fact that the personal consciousness is always trying to sort of assert itself and make itself known as the boss, when really it's not. It's just a you know, a component of consciousness, but that the little self is very demanding in that. And so the revelation that you've had is something that you should definitely hold on to and try and consciously bring into your awareness, especially when it's challenged, you know, in those situations in your life in which others are challenging you, or, you know, or their wisdom is threatening to your wisdom, or those sorts of things. Um, Certainly, you know, it's an incredibly valuable revelation to have. You know, there's only so much that my mind can kind of encompass, and for the rest of it, I have to open myself to deeper consciousness. So let's move on to talking about this last path, Aleph, which Brendine's mentioning that she found that last night a blockage let go, a feeling that she was held back, and that she was now free to move forward, and nothing could stop that. Excellent, beautiful experience to be having. So, the path of Aleph. Aleph means ox, and the Hebrew letter faintly resembles a you know, a sort of extremely stylized. You can see you get a sense of the horns anyway of a beast. And most likely the beast that's being referred to there is not the sort of domesticated animal that we are more familiar with, but the wild ox, which was a very ferocious beast, and one that was, you know, highly energetic, but then could be tamed and turned into the more domesticated animal, perhaps over generations of, you know, struggling. But so I mean, you're getting a multiplicity of ideas in there. Like, on the one hand, the oxen would represent a person's wealth or something, you know, if they had them. But on the other hand, the ox represents that sort of untamed wild spirit that flows, you know, from the divine. And the path of Aleph we have associated in the tarot. Now, it's interesting because there's a European tradition out of which, you know, Eliphas Levi and Papoose and some various other French magi will give the path of Aleph to the magician. And I think that there's a fair connection between that and doing that, and that whole system of correspondences, I think, works well. However, as I said at the beginning of this course, we're sticking with the Golden Dawn one, in which it's associated with the Fool. And if you look at this image of the Fool, you can kind of see the Aleph in it. You know, the legs, the way he's walking with his stick on his back, you sort of see the indication of the Aleph in there, which I'm sure was intentional on the part of Waite and Smith. You know, Waite and Smith were both initiates of the Golden Dawn, and so the Golden Dawn is a heavy influence upon the Rider-Waite tarot, although it's not completely so. I think in some cases he actually intentionally tried to befuddle people by putting some odd symbols into it, and in other cases he just simply went with his own interpretation of things that wouldn't strictly be the Golden Dawn. As the Golden Dawn, I wish I had a copy of the Golden Dawn one. It's quite different from this, and shows a young child who is being there's a wolf, I think, in the picture, and it's there's a few different renditions of it, and it's just a very different seeming symbol. Additionally, the dog that's present in this fool looks like it's a friend of the fool. Like it's his little companion, and they're on an adventure together. Whereas in the older versions of the fool, I couldn't find it in my deck, but I had this on the cover of a book. In the older versions of the book, it looks more like the dog is actually kind of attacking the fool, and the fool is just not paying attention. And that actually harkens back to an old image of Bacchus or Dionysus that shows a lion or something actually sort of attacking Dionysus, and he's not paying attention. Now Robin has said a couple things on here, so I'm just going to break this. Robin says, read a book one time that showed how the letters show up in most of the tarot cards. Yeah, they do in one way or another. But in fact, I don't have a magician in front of me. The magician in the Rider-Waite deck actually kind of looks like an Aleph as well, in the way that he's holding his. Robin says she forgets which the name of that book was. And Juan says something about Aleph, and I think I'm just going to ignore it for now. Maybe I'll come back to it towards the end. So now my version of I've got two versions. I don't know how to do it. The version that I like probably the best. It's a very composite image, and it sort of shows he's almost like a Buddha, but he's also like Dionysus, and he also has certain aspects of Harpocrates in him as well. So he kind of is a composite of a lot of the different sort of god forms that have been associated with the Fool card over the years. Robin says that she gives a link to the Golden Dawn Tarot image. People can check that out later, maybe. Additionally, there's another cool image that relates to the Fool. And now this indicates a different aspect of the Fool than the one that we're really exploring in this card. But I'll just show it anyway because it's an interesting thing, and that shows what this is the alchemist beginning the process of seeking the hidden stone, and he's sort of blind and following this rabbit towards. What does the rabbit symbolize? Well, I'm not really an alchemical expert, I must admit. I mean, I think there's a couple things being indicated by the rabbit. First of all, he's crafty. He goes into the earth. I think that's because he's got a little den that he lives in. But I mean that's kind of neither here nor there on the subject of today's class. The Path of Aleph energy that we're really I hope that gave you can probably look that up, Robin, and you'll get a more intelligent answer than I can give on that particular symbol in that setting. I mean, rabbit means a number of different things, but I think in alchemy in particular it's I'm not sure, to be honest with you. A hole in my knowledge. Alchemy is a world all its own. I think it's in this picture as a sort of homage to the dog that's in most tarot images. But that particular picture is a reference to an alchemical engraving that I've seen before, which shows it's a very complicated, like, one of those little riddle pictures, and it shows an alchemist like at the beginning of his quest in a rabbit hole, and the rabbit going in. Seems like it's sort of an early reference to going down the rabbit hole that we get from Lewis Carroll, and Carroll supposedly was influenced by alchemy and stuff like that too. So the rabbit is the shape of an Aleph. I guess you could sort of see that in there. More like a backwards Aleph. Yeah. But I mean, going down the rabbit hole, of course, is specifically a Lewis Carroll reference. So, alchemical engravings were were prior to him, for the most part. So, the idea of a mysterious, dark and mysterious underworld. Often snakes are very similarly associated in that they go into dark places and then come out, so they're sort of like of two worlds. Snakes even more so because they shed their skins as well, so they're like this ever renewing thing, and so they're the animal symbolism is very sort of involved subject, and it has nothing to do with the Path of Aleph as we're exploring right now. So back to where we were. The Path of Aleph is really about the divine ecstasy and the divine madness experience, the sort of losing oneself entirely in that divine ecstasy. The image of the I've got Crowley's cards here too. The image of the fool, we can see him in two ways. One is the sort of the foolish man who's just sort of starting out his journey, but the other is as the enlightened master who is wandering the world in a state of ecstasy, at least some of the time. And Crowley's version is rather unique to himself in that he has the fool as the green man, as a sort of a nature aspect, but he still has the knapsack on his back, which you can only just sort of see because it's very stylized, but it's right here, and inside of it are all the planets and all the zodiac symbols and so forth. So he's got kind of the universe in his sack as well. He's the divine human in its undeveloped state, in the way that the magus or the magician is more in its sort of developing state. There's a more embryonic quality to the Aleph figure, and so that's why I depicted him as being actually in an egg, and that egg also kind of harkens back to that Mithraic or Zoroastrian kind of cosmic egg mythology, in which the universe is kind of an egg in its growing, expanding outward. The thing about this path is that it's really a path of you're moving from an undeveloped state into a less developed state. You're moving from the sort of the divine, free of all manifestation, further into the divine, free of all manifestation. So it's a kind of a highly unmaterialistic path. You're beginning here. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to do this upside down or backwards in the camera. But you're starting here and going up to here, and so this is the path. So you're starting here, which is really, that's considered to be the divine, as it's coming into being. So you're kind of almost previous to that in this path. So. It's a path of experience rather than a path of learning per se, and so just allow yourselves to open up to it. So let's go back to just Q&A and chit-chatting for a few minutes, because I really, there isn't anything else to say about this path other than just again, open yourself to the experience of it in whatever way it comes to you. Actually, I'll go back to what Juan said, because he mentioned that he's already been through it. I know that Robin Robin doesn't want to be cued too much, but he says he went through Aleph last night. But it's because he has had some recent struggles. He couldn't fully enjoy the benefits of the meditation. There was a feeling of harmony that came over me towards the end of the meditation. It was rather odd with all the chaos in my mind. It made it feel as if it was conducted harmony. Yeah, I mean, you're you're making an effort to go behind and above all of your normal thoughts in life in any way in this path. So um, hopefully you can get outside of it, outside of life as it's manifesting at least a little bit while doing it. So, does anyone have any questions? One of the things that this particular path always makes me think of is the ox herding pictures in Zen Buddhism, and in a way, my New Hermetics Fool, which I haven't shown up until now, which just shows kind of a regular little cartoonish guy walking along, and he's sort of the way that I see that is that he's kind of walking off the edge of the yin part of the yin yang symbol. Um, so, but in those ox herding pictures, basically, you spend all this time and energy trying to tame the mind and understand awareness and consciousness, and in the end, you just return to the marketplace and are in every way a normal person, although inside you have been transformed, and in that particular set of images, it mentions that you are those who see you become enlightened. So there's been a strange silence. Can you guys just confirm that you guys are still out there? Have I brought you all into the state of divine intoxication to the point where you can no longer express yourselves verbally? Alex, it's nice to see you. You've been pretty quiet today. Have you managed to keep up with the meditations? I know I haven't uploaded all the recordings of them, but oh right, I forgot you mentioned you're intoxicated on Percocet. Well, I mean that would be an excellent time to work on the divine ecstasy. So Kevin says that an ox is a castrated bull with no sense of gender and is wild and strong. Yeah, I mean I think that's an element of the symbol as well. That there is a an undifferentiated quality to it, which the genderlessness would fit with. Is Percocet an opiate? I don't like any of those. They make me feel itchy. What kind of surgery did you have? Wow, that sounds painful? I don't... Oh, wow. Removing part of a disc from your spine? Yowzers. I guess maybe I would put up with some Percocet at that point. Alex wants to let us know that it was an arthroscopic surgery, so it's not as bad as it sounds. So does that mean that it was all done by just like a small incision and sticking like a weird camera thing in that lasers it away or something? Well, in that case, you're just abusing drugs. um, yes, let's all send some healing energy to Alex. So Kevin mentions that uh, he took care of cattle with his father. That he didn't have oxen, but they did castrate bulls and raise them for slaughter. They grew fast and were easy to tame. These are the same animals, when raised beyond slaughter, become oxen because they grow larger than a bull and become twice as strong. As I mentioned, though, I think that there's a dual symbol present there with the idea of the domesticated oxen, but also the idea of the oryx, which is the sort of wild animal. So I think that both of those things may be being insinuated by that particular thing. However, oxen most likely, because it represents sort of material wealth to a community that's domesticating animals, maybe the more relevant symbol, but certainly the wildness and the strength is important to recognize as well. Rendusha mentions that the path of the fool connects Kether, the source of all, with Chokmah, the first activity towards manifestation. Aleph is assigned to its path, the letter designated symbolic of absolute unity by the Zohar. That's from Robert Wang. I assume Kabbalistic tarot. Rendine says that she's just felt a sense of change, overwhelming change that is good and freeing, like a whole new world beginning to manifest, new things coming, stepping out in new areas I was fearful before. Well, that's great. Yeah, freeing is definitely a good word. Says Robin, for the record. Kevin says, I know that back in the day when they used oxen, they raised them because they continued to grow larger and larger and could become quite large, easier to pull a plow. The plow symbolized creating life. Therefore, they could create the life for the farmer in plowing his fields. Yes. Um, the uh, Sefer Yetzirah has some interesting things about this kind of subject and how the creation was a sort of a hewing and a cutting and a cleaving out of the nothingness, I guess. And so Aleph being the first letter and representing that sort of farming and working the land kind of an energy fits in well. Brendine says that she cried when she did Aleph, profusely deep, that new things were coming. It was an intense experience. Oxen are also like cash in ancient societies. Cattle give you power to buy. Yeah. So that certainly is something to keep in mind there. Certainly, it's interesting because in the it's a different letter, but in the runes, the first letter in the runes, which is a Fehu or something, I think, also represents cattle. And although it represents an F rather than an A, but that's interesting that the first letter in both of them has that quality to it of representing a domesticated animal, or possibly a wild animal that has been domesticated. Kevin says that the Aleph sort of looks like a plow. Indeed. Earlier versions of the Aleph, though, seem to more closely resemble an animal head. And in fact, our A quite closely resembles an animal head if you think about it. Upside down. Brindusha says, Aleph means ox, which has been interpreted in a variety of ways. Gareth Knight, for example, suggests that for the most earthy of beasts to be applied at this exalted level of the tree means that the spirit's aim is rooted in earth. Again, Robert Wang. Yeah, I mean that's an interesting possibility. Again, that may have some bearing, or the idea of sort of the primitive power may be more where it's coming from. Looks like we lost somebody. Who might that have been? Is it Kevin? I think it was Kevin. I hope he's okay. Alex says, boy, that's something people could profit from remembering, to keep things connected to the earth as well, even when dealing with something so exalted. Well, it's interesting because, you know, several of the other images that have been attached to this over time, you know, this same sort of symbol set that we're working with, are the Fool, who is kind of wandering the earth without anything, and Dionysus, who is definitely an earthy god, in that he, you know, is the personification of the cultivation of wine, and but at the same time he's very exalted in his energy, you know, and that he is intoxication. So I mean, there's a lot of the beginning and the end, and the end and the beginning. This is I actually think I was just reading the Zohar the other day, one of the first bits of it, and they mentioned something about how, you know, Malkuth was pulled up into Binah at the very beginning. So there's this, you know, the earth is a seed within the divine, and all this kind of stuff. So that idea, I think, is actually pretty present in things. But the main thing experientially that I'm encouraging you towards is just a total release into absolute, you know, just joy, ecstasy, ecstatic awareness. The yogic idea, or it may be the what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, one of those Indian things of Sat Chit Ananda, which is like bliss, being, and awareness. Brindusha says, Paul Case called the ox a symbol of the motive power in agriculture and equated agriculture with civilization. Thus, he described the ox as the life power, creative energy, and the power at work in all forms of human adaptation and modification of natural conditions. Brandine says, I have seen much more earth applications of spirituality recently, coming down to earth and dealing with real daily earth changes. I woke up this morning with an ecstatic happiness bliss. Everything was beautiful. It's terrific. Does anyone have any other questions or comments? Brindusha says, Crowley, on the other hand, concentrated on the letter's shape, said to represent a plowshare. Thus, he says, the significance is primarily phallic. Yeah. I don't think that that's entirely where Crowley goes with it. He also compares it with a swastika, and thus with the energy of it. You know, the swirling forward momentum of the universe. Crowley saw phalluses in a lot of stuff, though, for sure. Kevin says, I think Crowley was phallic. Yeah, well, he had one. At least that's what I've heard. Robin asks if there's anything we need to do to prepare for the Hermetic classes. I don't think so. If there's anything that occurs to me, I'll certainly put it in an email. As I said, I'd like for you guys to have experienced the relevant work before we have the class, so there can be a discussion of it, since that seems to provoke more conversation, or maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I would like it to be a discussion amongst people who have at least sort of had a taste of it, rather than who are coming into it without any experience of it, just because it's been around for a while. So I mean, I noticed, Robin, that you downloaded the initiation. So if we discuss that in the first one, if you have listened to those a couple times, that'd be good. Reducia says, cynics may suggest that Crowley saw phalluses everywhere he looked, despite the high philosophical tone of this argument. Again, Robert Way. Okay, Robin asks, will there be an assignment to do something, experience something prior to the class? Just the initiation then. In this first one, absolutely. We'll just there's nothing to do before initiation other than be initiated. But in future ones, there may be kind of like, I mean, when we talk about goals, it would be good if you guys, if people had already kind of written out some goals before we get started, so that we can discuss them rather than. I don't get too off the track here of Aleph, but what I would love to see people doing with this thing is we're gonna discuss goal setting within the New Hermetics and goal setting in general, and so I'd like you to have a set of goals with you when we discuss that, and that'll be, we're going to discuss beliefs, we're going to discuss creating artificial elementals, we're going to discuss a number of different things, and I'd like you to have what you'd like to do with it prepared. But because it is going to be a somewhat public forum, and I don't want you guys to get mum because of that, you may want to choose one or two things that you'd like to discuss that are something that you're okay with discussing publicly. I mean, some people have odd goals that they feel like they wouldn't want others to know about. So that don't allow yourself to get stuck in that path. Try and come up with some things that you'd like to work on that also you could work on around other people and not feel out of place. Brendine says, I would like to note on the bliss subject, Kevin and I did the Beth this morning and he was awake and happy afterwards. Felt wonderful. Awesome. Juan says that the classes seem exciting. Brenducia says, after I did the Beth meditation, I did a mini reading with Archangel Power tarot cards of Doreen Virtue, and the first card that jumped out of the deck was the Magician. Synchronicity for sure. Robin says that's synchronistic, Brenducia. So, proof of the existence of synchronicity in the universe. Which is kind of an ironic statement, since synchronicity is something that we apply to stuff. Rather. So of course it exists. It exists anytime things are the same. So I think we are gonna be cool for today, and I'd like to meet one more time in 2 weeks to discuss Aleph and just to kind of wrap up the whole experience and talk about any questions that people have. I know people were talking about going down the Tree of Life and where to go with it in the future, and so this will be that will be the last class on the specifically on these path workings. Although, to a certain extent, some of them may come up a little bit in the New Hermetics classes as well. Brendusha mentions that in her life she is in a beautiful flow of synchronicities, period. Brendine says, thank you so much for all your time and energy. You are certainly appreciated. Kevin says, this was a great class. Thank you, Jason, for your wonderful lessons. This has been wonderful. See you in 2 weeks. Awesome. Well, you guys are awesome. And Alex, I'm glad you're recovering. And Rurik, you didn't say anything today, but it's nice, always nice to see your name on there. And I will, like I said, if you're not on my mailing list at jasonaugustusnewcomb.com, I don't know if any of you are not, but be on it. I only send out, at this point, I only send out a newsletter once every few months, so it's not like you're going to get harassed by me a lot. But it'll make it easier for me to contact you. I will try and send at least one thing out to the list that's that I send to for this particular class, but it'll be easier if you're on constant contact, because I think that's how I'm going to arrange, because there's basically going to only be 12 spots. That's another thing I should mention. Because of the nature of Uvu, there's only going to be 12 spots in each class, so chances are, I mean, since there's only 7 of you here right now, that's not going to be an issue, but on the off chance that it happens to be one, it's probably a good idea to make sure that you're signed up in advance for things. Alright, I'm going to read some of what people are saying. Alex says, thanks, Jason. Brendusha says, see you to the last class of the incredible journey. Kevin says, thank everyone for attending and doing these classes with us. Yes, it's been wonderful having you on. I'm really glad that we had a nice little core group that made it all the way through the whole thing, which is fantastic. Juan says, huge thanks to each and every one in the community. Thanks for the participation, and thanks, Jason, for the insight and guidance. Rurik says, just listening. Robin says, thanks, Jason. Thanks to everyone. Awesome set of classes. And then Robin says, eek. I'm assuming that you were saying eek too when I said there's only 12 spots. But like I said, I mean, maybe, a year from now it'll be harder to get in. But at this point, I think we're okay. Brendan says, yes, thank you for all showing up for class and sharing. It is nice to know others' experiences. Juan says, LOL. And then he says, lottery. Now, I guess that's probably the way it would go if all of a sudden there are 100 people regularly asking to be part of it. It would have to be that way. Personally, not to be too nepotistic or whatever, but I'd rather give preference to people like yourselves who have kind of persevered through this whole thing. Robin wants to bribe me with food. That's a very weak spot for me, so that might work. But another thing that's possible is certainly Brendine, Juan, and Kevin. You guys are all in the same place, so you could just have one part of the Brady Bunch thing. So that would actually bring us down to an extremely manageable number right there. So. People keep mentioning bribes, and then Juan mentions Russian roulette, and well, Brendine thinks that's a little too much. Then Juan mentions Thunderdome. Okay. Okay. Well, for now, I'm gonna say we're gonna put the violent solutions. We'll put them in the back burner, and we'll go with more soft stuff for the moment. If necessary, I'm not opposed to the, if you guys want to fight it out, that's your affair. But I think we can probably eliminate that. The thing is, there are basically 2 groups of people who I would most like to see coming and being a part of it. One is you guys, because First of all, this will be there. I mean, I think you can probably do it with your camera off if you don't want to be on camera, but it's something where you can actually talk and we can see each other's faces better. Um, one, um, plus I know that you guys are fairly committed and and will be there regularly, and some of you have been through most of the material. Uh, and the other group of people is graduates of my various versions of my New Hermetics course, of which there are quite a few out there, none of whom are a part of this particular thing at all. So it would be nice to have them back at least once in a while. So those are the people who I would like to have in the discussion, and then if there are more spaces than that, then that would be more who I would just allow whoever to come at that point. But because of the fact that it's going to be a 12-way conference call, there's a lot of possibility for chaos in that situation. So there, people who are able to kind of behave by Robert's rules of order may also be the people who all want to have come on a regular basis. So anyway, Path of Aleph. Joy, ecstasy, openness to the divine, oneness with the divine, losing oneself in the divine intoxication of the divine, and also being ultimately that oneness with that tremendous power that creates the universe out of nothing, which we may call consciousness or gaudiness. Alright guys, I'm going to stop the recording. I don't want you guys to leave quite yet though, hold on.